I read this letter in the Globe and Mail and thought to myself, well, maybe there's a problem here. It got published here first, then ended up in the Globe and Mail. And frankly, I'm not sure, but it was a bit of an eye-opener for me. SHEILA Das is a humanities professor here at Vanier. She speaks English and French and Italian, and I guess fair to say this is an op-ed, as I said, in the Globe and Mail, and I wanted to follow up on it because it covers some ground that I don't think anyone has talked about before as far as Bill 96 is concerned. And she's on the line right now. SHEILA, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Am I correct that this was published in the Globe and Mail?
Yeah, that's correct.
And not here?
No, I went to the Globe and Mail because they would allow me to publish it elsewhere, also in French, after 2 days. So I thought that would be a good place, and I also think it's something missing from the national conversation.
Okay, well, let's talk about what you wrote. I want to start off with the question that you asked right off the top, or close to the top, which simply is this. Speaking of Bill 96, you ask, but is it necessary? And then point to the fact that Bill 101, and we kind of asked this question here, I think, not that long ago, Bill 101 doing the job of advancing French to begin with, and then you point out the studies that show the public use of French has actually been on the increase. So the premier, whenever he talks about it, always uses that, his own numbers, as the boogeyman here to suggest this is why we need to protect French. Why is that not right?
Well, I'm not sure why he's using that. I think there's probably a lot at stake here to describe to the French-speaking public that French is at risk. But when you look at how French is being used, generally, it's been on a mild increase. It's not huge, but it's been going up. Of course, there are various ways that you can evaluate what is considered, say, French fluency. Is it just speaking French in public while you're out and about? Is it being able to write in French? Is it being able to work in French? So I think, there are different ways to even evaluate what that might mean.
Something that stood out to me, so that's part that stood out to Aaron. What stood out to me is that you're saying English does not enter the brain like a language-eating parasite and replace native tongues. I found solace in that, and then even more so when you went on to compare it to a fungi. Can you explain to us how English is a fungus?
Yeah, it's just, I love what I've been learning in the last year, what's been published about fungal life. And you can think of Suzanne Samar, who I cited in the text, and Merlin Sheldrake also, who's written a book exclusively dedicated to fungus called Entangled Life. And it's that fungus is this incredible, creature that connects various different kinds of life forms from bacteria to plant forms to animal forms. And it also can send messages one way to another. And so while it also, admittedly is not always a positive force, but largely it's a force of connection and allowing for life. And I think when I think about metaphor and how powerfully it's been used by the current government, I think we need to counter their messages of metaphor of a fragile Quebec, the new Louisiana, with a metaphor I think that is more descriptive and more accurate about the English language, and that's one of connections, not just within the English community here, but really with the world at large.
You also wrote, and I reference this because when I hear the premier talk, I hear one thing. We all hear the one thing he says, but it's not even the idea that English is on the rise, you're right, but the ability to speak English. That seems to be what bothers them. And then you're right that what it implies is that a young Francophone student who goes to an English CEGEP, for example, to improve their English, somehow will lose their ability to speak French. That's what the government seems to be warning citizens about. But then you say that kind of reasoning simply is not the case. It doesn't apply. Why?
Well, first of all, the idea is that at the CEGEP level, they've been wanting to reduce the amount of English courses that Francophone and Allophone students would be able to take and replace those with French courses. And it seems that they want to reduce the ability of Francophone and Allophone speakers to learn French, and still at the CEGEP level, this is after they've passed through, primary and secondary school, that they still need to be working more on their French. And that suggests to me that there's some kind of, fear that they're ability to speak English is going to infringe upon somehow their ability to speak French. And it's also been talked about with the expression vectors of anglicization for cégep colleges, that once a francophone person speaks or learns English, they're going to go on to speak English with English friends and work exclusively in English, and somehow, that conjures up the idea that their French is lost. But of course, your original, your native tongue is not lost. It's just added to.
Right.
And so I see, learning languages. I chose to learn Italian because I thought it was beautiful. I chose to move to Quebec because I love French, and I think French is beautiful. And I think that adding to our knowledge of various languages is enriching, not something to be wary of.
I couldn't agree
said
with
that better.
you more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, it just makes me think about what you wrote, that English does not enter the brain like a language-eating parasite. It doesn't replace native tongues. And yet that seems to be the approach that this government has taken. They've decided specifically to treat English like a threat. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I don't really want to speak to their motives. I can't say directly, but what I can say is that we've seen this kind of language come up before. We've seen it when they were talking about Bill 91, and that there was a threat of proselytism if people were to wear certain religious signs, of certain garments with religious symbolism. We see that language also being talked right now when they're talking about immigration. Again, this idea that immigrants, in particular refugees and family members, pose a threat to French in Quebec. So I kind of think when you take it all together, you see a picture where the government is trying to cast difference as a threat, and I wonder if they think that's going to play to their political base. I wonder if they think that's going to somehow cast themselves as the supreme defenders of the Quebec nation, when I think Quebec certainly can be improved. Every place can be improved and made stronger, but I think it can be done in a more cooperative model, and using the richness that different kinds of people in our community can bring.
Yeah, it's very much, and we've talked about this before, it's this casting of a they are not us sort of routine. Can I just ask you something completely off the cuff? Have you given any thought to get involved politically?
Well, I had done some political volunteering in the past, but no, nothing beyond that.
Okay. I ask because I think you make some, very, very interesting points, and without necessarily, setting anyone's hair on fire. So I'm wondering, when you talked about being able to post this in French, have you already done that? Will you do that?
No, I haven't yet. I've sent it out, so I'm waiting to see if it will be received.
Yeah, I'd love to know what reaction will be on the French side from this.
And but how has the reception been on the English side? I see there's quite a few comments on the post.
Well, I've seen quite a few comments also on various social media pages, and a lot has been kind of like, oh, that's a refreshing way to look at a tired old argument. Some people would have liked a more, I would say, like, frontal discussion of, like, well, what are the facts versus other facts? But my whole point of the article was that I don't think a discussion just of statistics is what's really happening right now. What's happening is the powerful use of a story, of narrative. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to go back to facts, definitely. I think objective reality is extremely important to build our narratives, but I think when we think about how we can live together and build our community stronger together, I think we need a better story, and that's why I thought of the idea of fungal life, because it is a metaphor of interconnections.
I want to read just before we go here, because we have to wrap up, the last part of what you wrote. You wrote, English facilitates exchange from different people all over the globe, and cutting yourself off from it, or your children, or trying to push out the English community so fewer chances of exposure exist, does not protect anyone in a cooperative model. It isolates, it prevents exchange, it blocks opportunity. In short, it is not useful. I want to thank you for the time this afternoon, SHEILA. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
SHEILA Das, humanities professor at Vanier. Very curious to see what happens if this gets published in French and what kind of reaction comes from that. As I said, this will be interesting to see.
I can tell you a P. Lefebvre commented on it 11 minutes ago and says, anti-French attitude is a fact in these pages. No need to deny it.
There you
There's
go.
nothing anti-French
No,
in there.
not at all. It's not even about French. It's about English. Doesn't say anything about French at all.
Frustrating.